As part of the Gun Simone commissions for my last season as music director in Seattle, my dear friend Jouzef Švantnъr wrote a piece called A Poet's Hour for solo violin and strings.
10 years ago, my wife Janet and I decided to move to southern New Hampshire, where we've been living since that time. And there's something about the spirit of that land, and so I've been reading lots of Thoreau, obviously a transcendental writer from New England, and I recall these words from his journal of 1853. There are from time to time mornings, both in summer and winter, when especially the world seems to begin anew, beyond which memory need not go. It's the poet's hour. And one of the things about living in New Hampshire is a kind of extraordinary environment. You get up early in the morning and the mist wafts through the trees, and kind of extraordinarily invigorating environment. And to now lead an artist's life, to make my own decisions about how I proceed through the day, has really been most meaningful for me. And so my music is really tinged by that environment, obviously. And for me, I guess the violin part is the poet's voice in this composition.
When I first heard it, I immediately really loved it because I thought, I remember two words coming to my mind: haunting and beautiful. And it's very simple, but those two words like really struck me, like that mood that the music was conveying. So, I started learning it, and it was surprisingly challenging.
I call it a soliloquy for violin and orchestra. It's not a solo piece, obviously, but in some ways, in my mind, the piece could also almost be played just as a violin solo. It's not to say that the string orchestra is not important. It is, obviously, but I had that kind of narrative, a kind of continuum. There's almost not a place where the violin doesn't play, and so you're attached, as in a dialogue where you're listening to someone reciting a poem.
He starts off very simply. Now, in a way, if I play them all together, it's really quite beautiful, but it's not what you'd expect. So you have this, which almost sounds like this chord, but then he doesn't do that. He plays this note, so it's this chord. And then he adds this one, and then this one. And that's the language, in a sense, that sets the tone. When you have everyone playing very softly these pitches and holding the pitches. And then the violin comes in, and the violin plays all fourths, and he does them as harmonics. So when you watch Yevgeny play, he's not pushing a note down, he's pushing one finger down and touching with another, and that creates a note that's 2 octaves higher. So he's playing this note, but this one comes out because of that. It's an eerie kind of a sound. And if you think about what Joe was trying to do with the poet's hour and the mornings in summer and winter, it's hesitant. It's like the morning is just about to begin. Then he finally brings in the cellos and basses just to do these pitches. And then again, he does the same kind of building of pitches, but in a completely different register. When the violin comes in, he comes in playing all sixths. Then, the same material, but this time, there are single notes in the violin. They're not double stops anymore. And it's answered by the orchestra playing. And then, violin solo. And then, again, orchestra back and forth. And then, the same note from the beginning for the cellos and basses. And this then builds with that same material, just exactly that, and then it comes to an end. And after it comes to an end, the violin section plays just very simple. So that's what the violins play. While the violins are playing that, the solo violin is playing those same harmonics again in the high register. But what becomes really interesting is that the cellos, basses, violas, and second violins have a figure that begins, and what happens is the bass plays the first one with the cello, and the second with the cello, the third with the viola, the fourth note with the seconds. So it's, and every one of those pitches is held. Again, gives us a whole nother sound. And the basses play theirs pizzicato, so they're plucking, and when they stop and they go, that remains. That section then comes to an end, and the solo violin now leads the next section, and this becomes a little more complicated. He has this note, then he does, it's a whole nother mood, and then that is developed. Then it brings us to a kind of a section that's a little more stagnant with a lot of little stops and starts, basically with the same material. And then we have a little cadenza. And now the central section begins. The central section is basically this kind of rhythm. With changing pitches and the accompaniment. Then the solo violin, which we recognize, and then the answer is from the orchestra, and then the solo violin, and then again the answer from the orchestra. This material continues. It repeats. You know, I think it's, in a sense, it's a little minimalist in the sense that there are subtle changes, but it keeps repeating the same material. But what's interesting is the changes are fascinating, and it doesn't last long before he moves on to the next idea. But the ideas all relate. I mean, it's extraordinary. Then another little cadenza, and then the violin has a whole extended section where he's playing very fast notes leading to a full-blown cadenza. When the cadenza is over, this ostinato passage in the basses begins, and it goes on for a long time. You won't even notice it after a while, because the other members of the string section are playing something not dissimilar, while the violin plays, again, some real virtuoso double stops. Basically, he, the violinist, brings back all that material, develops it in this kind of almost primitive way in the accompaniment, and it leads back to the same kind of fourths we did as harmonics, and finally basses. You'll hear again playing. You know, you won't even notice that they were there. And all of a sudden the piece ends and that's it. They're just there playing it. Very poignant, very subtle, very beautiful. And I think Yevgeny played it exceptionally well.